What's going on, GBA fans? My name is Berk, and today I'll be bringing you the Week 3 power rankings for the GBA Season 6. Now, unfortunately, Trav cannot be here. He is not feeling well, so y'all just have to direct all of your hatred towards me this week. And with that being said, we can go right into my number 16. And at number 16, I have the Milwaukee Sawsbucks. Now, Battler X played, I would say, not a great game this week. He didn't bring anything really too crazy this week. You know, Flame Charge Heatran, I guess, but overall it's pretty standard prep, pretty solid. The freeze second turn really sucked. You know, it's a standard Battler X thing to get kind of hacked out right in the beginning of the game, but did it really matter in terms of outcome of the battle? I doubt it, although he wasn't able to get rocks up, so maybe that would have helped. And he should have just definitely sacked off the Sand Slash when something got frozen, because once the Sand Slash got frozen, he then let his Slowbro take huge amounts of damage. Slowbro is what he needed to deal with Mega Gallade, something to switch into Mega Gallade. And he let that take a ton of damage, and even with the Regenerator, you know, you have to do a lot of switch games. But he definitely should have sacked off the Sand Slash, especially if you don't have a Heal Beller. Like, it's basically just dead weight. You have a 20% chance to thaw, and that's rarely going to happen, so you might as well just sack it off, just get rid of it. You're going to lose a lot more momentum by trying to save it, thaw it out, than just letting it die. Steve does go 6-5 up, though. He takes out the Claydol, and this is something that in a lot of his battles, he goes 6-5 up, and then he starts losing it. And he has a very, very bad track record when he goes 6-5 up. A lot of the criticism he gets, it's either he's playing too safely, he's playing too aggressively, or too risky. I think the problem with Battler X's playing is that it's both. When you're up in a battle, you want to play safely, or a little more safely. You don't have to make really risky plays, because you're already ahead. Risky plays are what you either do to get into the game or ahead of the game. He's already ahead. He doesn't have to make those risky plays, but he does. In this case, it was predicting the Gallade to go for bulk up, so he goes for Thunder Wave with the Slowbro instead of saving the Slowbro, which was a safe play, and he kind of needed that Slowbro. But he sacks it off because he's trying to make these hard reads right in the beginning of the game, and doesn't work out. Then, as the match progresses, Battler X loses control, and Battler X is behind, and instead of making now the risky plays to try to get yourself back into the game, this is when he starts making really, really safe plays. Quick attack every single time on the Mega Gallade instead of predicting the Mana Zone to come in when you've already seen it be the most reliable switch into Mega Pinsir. He doesn't make any predictions late game, even though that's when he has to get himself into the game. And I think it's those risky plays in the beginning of the game that just, it throws him off, and then he's like, okay, I made this really risky play, now I gotta start playing safely for the rest, and that doesn't work out. And it won't work out for him. One thing that I will mention is Sawsbuck did get a kill, which is 2 more than I thought he'd get all season. It also has more kills than Mega Pinsir. So at number 15, I have the San Jose Sharpedos, and Tom has been improving. His planning, much better, and his playing has gotten much better as well. I know he said he needed to make an adjustment to how he plans and how he plays, and this week you can really see that he is making that adjustment. The Gelatin set he brought this week was absolutely perfect for the game. It shut down almost all of George's offense, shut down a lot of the walls. George couldn't really do much to deal with it. And when we get into the game, he made a lot of doubles needed in the early game to get himself into a better offensive position, not just pivoting between walls. And he was doing really well until he made a series of what I would say are pretty bad plays. He lets Machamp take huge damage from the Nidoqueen. He made an assumption that the Nido was going to be special attacker. That is not generally the case, especially in League format when people take advantage of the actually better attack stat of the Nido twins. You know, that sucked, but then later on he sacks off the Mega Aerodactyl to the Latias, and he said, well, I got really good information out of it. And I don't really see how he got really good information on the Latias at that point, because at one point in the match, he has his Cobalion in on the Latias. The Latias goes for the Energy Ball, deals a decent amount of damage, gets a special defense drop, and then switches out. You do the calcs, you find it's not specs. You always do calcs based on how much damage something does to you, because then you can gather information on the set. At that point, why would Latias switch out if not for it being locked into Energy Ball? Because you got the special defense drop. I mean, that did quite a bit of damage for being resisted, and then a Draco Meteor would definitely either take out or pretty much take out the Cobalion at that point. And so it's those questions you need to ask yourself, well, why did he switch out? He switched out because he's probably scarfed. There doesn't seem to be any other reason really to switch out at this point, because he could probably take me out with another hit that's not a resisted non-stab attack. He really used that Jellicent set well. It just completely shut down the Melodic. He's breaking a bad habit. He's actually recovering his walls when they get low. That is very, very good. You need to do that. For the missing of the Toxic, did that lose him the game? It's possible. I don't know exactly how the game would go if he didn't miss the Toxic. He would have probably been able to take out the Latias, and then that might have won Tom the game. But Tom is improving, and if he keeps playing this well and he keeps improving in his planning, he's definitely going to pick up some wins very soon. So at number 14, I have the Mewcastle United. This was a very different week for Sam. He decided to go a lot less passive because the passive didn't work, and he just went almost completely offensive with his entire team. What I don't like is the fact that if you're going to bring a really offensive team, you got to bring at least something fast to outspeed a lot of your opponent's team. His fastest thing was Kirim. He had no Scarfers, one Dragon Dancer. It's too slow to be a really good, really offensive team. And his plan was to set up and sweep the Dragonite, but he just didn't have really anything to set up on, aside from the Registeel, which I will get to later. One thing that's just I didn't like in the planning, if you see your opponent has a Defiant user, that should be a red flag not to bring an Intimidator. That's a red flag. Don't do it. Don't you do it, because what's going to happen is they're going to take advantage of the fact that you have a very common Intimidator, which Crocodile almost always runs Intimidate in League format, because very rarely you're going to be able to get actual Moxie Sweep, and Intimidate just has a great utility. Don't bring it. And I know he said that it would allow him to take an Iso Crash from the Weavile, but is that really something you want to have to be able to take with a Crocodile? I don't think so. What happens is even a Mon that's not even that great, like Primeape, can get off big damage because it just switches into the Intimidate. It gets a net +1 boost and then just can really take a big chunk out of anything, and that's what it did this week. It really put pressure on Sam's team. He wasn't able to effectively deal with it. In this match, while he had taken the lead, he let a lot of things get worn down. The Suicune, the Electros, just things that don't have recovery on his team were getting really worn down. It was inevitable that there's probably going to be a sweep at some point if he lets everything get so whittled down. One thing I just really liked was how he set up the situation to get a Dragon Dance off with Dragonite for free. Making sure that the Registeel stayed alive and making sure that he get the Dragonite in, get up a Dragon Dance, take the Thunder Wave, and then try to sweep. It was a very well engineered situation. However, he just didn't have that little bit of chip damage he needed on the Ape to kill it, and he just gets swept at the end because his team's too worn down. So, Sam plays very well. It was just that little bit right at the end that just cost him the game. I think his planning is much better this week. I still think he's trying to get adjusted to his team, and so he's just struggling trying to get a foothold in the season. At number 13, I have the Borussia Donphan. I know I said Sam went offensive this week. Lars just went straight. It looked like hyper offense this week. No real walls to speak of besides Rocky Helmet, Rough Skin Druddigon, and I have no idea why he brought that. I know why he brought it. He brought it because of a physical Victini threat from Dan, but there's no reason to bring it, because if this was the first time that Lars had Druddigon and Dan had Victini, this is the first time they battled with that matchup, then I would say, yeah, makes sense that you'd bring that. But this is, I think, the fourth time now that Dan has had Victini and Lars has had Druddigon that they've played, and Lars has brought Rough Skin, Rocky Helmet, Druddigon every single time. So you have to change it up. You have to play some mind games. Could Dan still bring a physical Victini? Yes. But is it likely? No. And it showed, because Druddigon died really early and didn't do anything. It took a blue flare, got burned, and then died from the resulting Dazzling Gleam. Lars did play really well around the Rotom to ensure a good matchup. He got his Shaman in a lot, trying to get off a lot of Seed Flares. Unfortunately, I don't think he really got any special defense drops. He might have gotten one. So a little bit unlucky there. He didn't have Dazzling Gleam on the Shaman. I'm not really entirely certain why. Dan has a lot of dragons, and Dazzling Gleam helps with those, a lot of dragons. Unfortunately, like with this match, same with Sam. I feel like these matches are very similar. He played well, but he let everything get so whittled down. And with no recovery aside from Leech Seed, the team was getting set up for the sweep. This is a problem, because if you're going to run very, very offensive, for one, you can't let your team get super whittled down, and you need something that's going to outspeed the entirety of your opponent's team, both of which you didn't do. The only thing that could take an Outrage was the Scizor, but he let that take a Thunder, and then it couldn't take out a Bullet Punch. That was the only resist outrage, and it was able to die to 1 outrage. And one thing, he kept saying how he needed the aftermath damage on the Flygon to make sure that a Bullet Punch could take it out, and that's good thinking, but you actually have to act on that. And I know he said he didn't want to let Dan have momentum. Unfortunately, you're going to have to give up a little bit of momentum if you absolutely need that aftermath damage. So the play to make was you had to switch it out, and you didn't switch it out because you didn't want to let up momentum, and that really cost you. At number 12, I have the Philadelphia Scissors. Now, Chimp, these battles are really showcasing why I did not like Chimp's team. I don't really think Chimp lost this match based on how he played. He played as, I think, well as he could, but it all came down to the planning. Because when your team literally cannot deal with a Mon, like, let's say, Volcanion, for instance. Let's say Volcanion. You're going to have to make some really big differences in planning to somehow take the hits. Whether it be a berry, I know he brought a Water Absorb Politoed, but that's not the only move Volcanion gets, and he didn't even bring it specially defensive. He brought physically defensive Politoed to deal with Volcanion, but most likely Volcanion is going to be special with Steam Eruption and Fire Blast. You need to make sure that you can deal with the special Volcanion, which he absolutely could not, because Fire Blast still did a clean like 40-45% to a physically defensive Politoed. You need to make that specially defensive. One of his most reliable walls that you see on his team that he likes to bring is Steelix, and Steelix is still bad. Like, Steelix is just bad. There's not really too much to say about the battle itself. Try to get rocks up at any point he can to try to whittle down the Volcanion as much as he could, but there wasn't really anything he could do. His opponent had so much pivoting and Volcanion that every time Chimp would bring in Steelix, it offered almost a free switch in for Volcanion, and then something died, basically. As far as like misplays are concerned, I would say he only had 2 misplays. One where he brings in Metagross on a Steam Eruption, a Choice Spec Steam Eruption, and I've never seen Metagross go down that quickly. There was a Steam Eruption, and I don't remember ever seeing a Metagross. And then like pivoting into Torn, taking a Fire Blast, and pivoting into Politoed, taking a Fire Blast, and then dying the next turn to another Fire Blast. He's got to make some changes in planning where if he finds a Mon that he just doesn't have any switch-ins to, he's got to find a way to actually be able to deal with it. At number 11, I have the New York Metapods. This was a much better week for Dan. I think he really adjusted his planning. I really think he adjusted his play style. He definitely did not make as many overly aggressive plays that he made last week that really hurt him. So in planning, like, I like the Sucker Punch Galvantula just in case he needs to get that last gas pit against Zam, because Zam's fragile, and even though, you know, Galvantula doesn't have that really good attack, it'll still deal pretty good damage, especially if you just need to pick it off. And Dan learned from his past matches against Druddigon. He brought a special Victini with Dazzling Gleam and Blue Flare, which just easily dispatched Druddigon, so no worries there. He just played more safely than he had in past weeks. He made the middle ground plays instead of these overly aggressive plays that could really backfire on him. At some points, I think he was playing a little bit too safe. You know, he's playing really safely around the Shaman, and he would not bring in his Victini. And I know the Victini was low on health. However, there was a point at which he could bring in the Victini almost for free on like a U-turn. Lars just didn't have any switch-ins to Victini, and you need to see that. Oh man, Lars literally can't switch into this thing. I need to pivot this in at every chance I can. Really, this was pretty straightforward for Dan. He had the walls to take on Lars' offense. He made sure that he could whittle down enough of Lars' things that could take an outrage, or at least one outrage, whittle those down enough so then he could bring in Flygon, click outrage, and then just click it again, and clean up the entire match. So he's starting to use his Mons better. One thing I wanted to mention is, Dan, you absolutely have to check your Mons. I feel like Dan gets the Mons from his Jenner and then just goes into the battle with them and does not check anything, because this week he brought a Leftovers Chansey, not Eviolite. And this was not on purpose. He just did not check his Mons, brought a Leftovers Chansey, and you cannot do that, because items are one of the easiest things to fix. Like, and this applies for all coaches. All coaches need to check their teams once they get them from the Jenner and make sure that there are no mistakes, like wrong items, wrong EVs, wrong IVs, or anything like that. At number 10, I have the Utah Jasmine. This match, I felt like Cooper played much better last week. Much better. Better planning, better everything. He made sure to get the rocks up in this battle to wear down Mega Pinsir, which I feel like is something that nobody really seemed to want to do last season against Mega Pinsir, but, you know. And his freeze in the beginning ensured that his rocks stayed up. I don't think it was a big deal in terms of who would win the match, but who knows. And I know Cooper said the rocks don't bother his team. I think they did bother his team somewhat because his switch into the Mega Pincer was the Magnezone. I don't think it would have gotten leftovers enough to take a quick attack and rocks and still being sturdy. I don't really know why he brought a slow Magnezone to check Mega Pincer. I feel like a Scarf Zone would be better because then you at least outspeed it. You can still switch into those quick attacks, into those returns, and then you immediately threaten it out because it doesn't matter if you're in sturdy range because you outspeed it and you take it down in one hit. I don't think Cooper really had to play that outrageously. He played safely in the late game while he was already ahead. He let Battler X play safely while Cooper was still ahead, and then Cooper stays ahead. Yeah, so I think Cooper fixed a lot of mistakes he made last week, made sure he had ways to deal with a lot of Battler X's offense, and was able to at least take down the walls somewhat effectively. So at number 9, I have the Pittsburgh Piratas. Now, this was not a great game for Tup this week. This was not a great game. I do like the fact that he brought Sand this week. It limits healing in both Cress and Chesnaught. I don't know why he brought the Excadrill, though. Sandrush Excadrill, I think, just had a bad matchup. Sandrush Excadrill can't touch the Cress, can't touch the Chesnaught, can't really touch it like a physically defensive Zapdos. Like, it just can't touch the walls, and even though it outspeeds, it's not really going to be doing much damage, and we really saw that this week. X-Scissor was doing almost nothing to Chesnaught. I don't really understand the facade on the Hippo. Like, I don't understand the logic. I know he can get status, but you might as well have Stone Edge. And really, this battle, it was neck and neck right in the beginning, but I think a lot of the misplays came from how he played around the Entei, and that really lost him just a ton of momentum and offensive presence. Like, he played way too recklessly with his offense for almost no reason. Why would you stay in with your Azelf on Entei? To scout for the band? But you have Hippo for that. Go into Hippo, and even if it takes a Sacred Fire, you're a physically defensive Hippo, you're going to take the Sacred Fire, slack off later. And then you can do calcs to see, oh, this is banded damage. But no, he lets the Azelf get taken down, which then says to him, this is banded Entei, and then he switches into not the Hippo, which would have easily taken E-Speeds and threatened it out. Because he lets Rotom Heat take a lot of damage, and basically all his offense is decimated, aside from Excadrill, which can't really do much to a combination of Crest, Chestnut, and Zapdos. So those misplays around Entei just really set Tup back, and without the Azelf, he's going to have a hard time taking down Chestnut. The Excadrill is not going to be able to pull through. The subboard, the Chestnut, it was just unnecessary. You know you're going to lose. You're going to just keep getting whittled down, and the Chestnut's just going to keep recovering, and you can't expect Geo to not go for Synthesis when he's barely taking any damage from the X-Scissor. Go ahead into your Tentacruel, threaten it out, get a little bit of offensive momentum on your side, and put Geo on the back foot, instead of just hitting X-Scissor on Chestnut when it's barely doing anything. It was a long battle. I don't think Tup's team was ready for the long game. I think it was there for a very quick offensive game, and Geo was having none of that, and so Tup had a pretty hard time dealing with the walls after all of his offense got whittled down. I do like the fact that he had Substitute on the Excadrill, though. It was good reasoning to make sure that in case the Ditto wanted to come in and it wanted to transform into the Excadrill, at least Tup's Excadrill would be behind a sub and then could deal with Ditto. Make sure that Geo couldn't use the Sand Rush against him. So at number 8, I have the Boston Red Sox. And this match in general, there's just not much to talk about because it was an extremely short battle. Nick, what are you doing? Volt Switch and Baton Pass on Jolteon. Why? I don't know. I don't understand. You don't need both. I know the switch into Jolteon is a Don fan, but if you at least predict somewhat well, you'll get an HP Ice off and you'll 2-ko it. So it's not really, I don't really see the point of the Baton Pass. Maybe just didn't need the cover, so it's like, let's put Baton Pass on there. Really, this came down to him playing poorly around the Jirachi in the early game, which then put all the momentum in Envy's favor, and he couldn't get it back because what happened was he let the Jirachi set up Calm Minds, and from there he had to sack off Zam because he had to bring in his Alakazam, outspeed, get up the T-Wave, and then kill off the Jirachi, which Zam was really important in this match to make sure that things like the Gyarados can't set up. Things like the Togekiss can't just outspeed everything. So he really needed that Zam, and he lost it really early. I don't really understand setting up Tailwind on the Skarmory, and then he started doing phasing while Tailwind, all he's doing is just wasting Tailwind turns. So he only had one left, and it just literally did nothing. There was no point in setting up the Tailwind. I don't think he really thought that move through, because If he'd set up rocks and then whirlwinded around, alright, that's a good way to phase. His Venusaur, although a great wall, it dealt with the Gorbis and didn't let it sweep, but at the same time it took so much damage that, you know, Togekiss can come in and kill it, and from there, he tried to come back by killing the Togekiss with his Feraligatr. Unfortunately got flinched. I don't think the flinch mattered in terms of who won the game. I think that Envy still could have won because he's got the Wakan Berry. He would have switched into his Gyarados, gotten the Intimidate, set up 2 Dragon Dances, killed off the Kyurem, killed off the Feraligatr, and then we would just be looking at the same result, maybe like 1 less differential. Maybe. It might have been a 1-0 instead, but that flinch did seal the game for Nick. His only remote chance of winning was to not get flinched, and because of getting flinched, he did lose that match outright. But this is just a really straightforward match. Lost momentum in the beginning, and I don't think he thought his plays through enough right in the beginning, and he just couldn't pull it back. So at number 7, I have the New Orleans Pelipers, and this was probably one of my favorite matches of the week. It was a really good match. John brought Magic Guard Reuniclus. I don't understand. This is such a change from previous battles. He always brings Regenerator, but this week he actually brought the Magic Guard. He brought Gravity on Landorus. It was an interesting concept, actually counterproductive in the match because he let his mons take spike damage. In game, he always makes sure that he uses the Scavalier to use knockoff, get rid of any Rocky Helmet uses to try to set up in the late game for low punny. So it's always really good thinking ahead, and that he really does well. He did bring the Mirror Coat Gastrodon, but he kind of broadcasted it when he stayed in on a Moongus. Like, why else would you stay in? You probably have the Rindo Berry Mirror Coat. And I think he's starting to get a little bit too paranoid with the Acelgor set. Like, when he stayed in with the Latios, it already shown Spikes and Protect. If it had Pursuit, then it's left with one move that might be coverage, but the Pursuit doesn't really do too much besides maybe trapping the Latios, but Acelgor has a pretty bad attack stat anyway, so it's not even going to do that much damage if he gets it right. So I think it was more likely that the Bug Buzz was there, and I don't think he thought of that. There just wasn't any reason to stay in, because even if it had Pursuit, you either stay in, he goes for Bug Buzz or Pursuit and you die, or you switch out, he goes for Pursuit and you die, or he goes for Bug Buzz and you still have your Latios left around. One thing John did really well is he was always trying to, once he realized that low pun he couldn't sweep because basically it had to take a Focus Blast to the face, he tried to set up the late game for Reuniclus. He used Gastrodon to set up for Sleep Fodder so he could bring in the Reuniclus on the Amoonguss, able to set up the Trick Room, deal with the Azumarill, and then possibly able to kill the Emboar if not for a higher roll. It wasn't in his favor, but still, overall, I don't think there was any misplays to speak of. He kept getting crit, so it's not like he could really gain a lot of momentum. Would John have won without the crits? I don't know. Again, plays would have been different, but John played really well, and I didn't move him down that much. He did lose, but it was a very close battle. Just like all of John's battles these past few weeks have been really good, really close. So John still ranked decently high, but I think John is going to pull it around and start getting more wins underneath his belt because he's playing really well, but he's also playing against really good opponents. So at number 6, I have the Real Marill, and Miguel is really pulling the season around. Last week, it looks like he was shaking off the rust, and this week it looks like he's really shaking off the rust. The planning was pretty good. He realized that Earthquake just kind of deals with his entire team, so he put Shukaberry, counter, Registeel to deal with the Crook. That's good planning. It's alluring, and then being able to deal with it. Sam saw through it, but, you know, it's a good attempt. The Defiant on Primeape was good. Take advantage of the Intimidate on Crocodile. And he started with that. He opens with the Primeape, and he's able to just immediately take a ton of momentum right away. He is able to maintain that momentum throughout most of the match. He didn't play that great around the Suicune, mostly in part due to a special defense drop around the Gothitelle, and he started letting things take a lot of damage. Granted, he was able to get rid of the Assault Vest, but, you know, I do like the fact that every time he thought that rocks might go up, he always was prioritizing getting them off the field, make sure his mons take as little damage as possible. He wasn't successfully able to keep rocks off the field for the entire match, but it's that forethought to make sure they stay off the field and get the Blastoise in as much as possible. While not taking the early lead in this game, he made sure to whittle down Sam's team. As I said before, he whittled down the Suicune, the Electros, and just other things in the team, so that Primeape could come in at the end and then sweep up with either an Ice Punch or Close Combat or something. And it did. So he stayed ahead of the game throughout the match. He never really let up the momentum and took advantage of Sam's planning well. And if he keeps doing this, I think he's gonna continue to do well this season. And at number 5, I have the Tampa Bay Loseweights. Mono played a really good game this week, and I think he's really showing why he deserves to be in the GBA. Good, solid planning this week. Nothing outrageous, but it was efficient. Very efficient planning. He does not do crazy sets well, but he's able to use his mons to the best of their ability. I love the Selgor set. Used it well to get up spikes and to avoid fake outs on the low punny. Be able to take out low punny with a focus blast, possibly if it had taken just a little bit of chip damage. And Mono did what he does best this game. He made the middle ground plays and kept John on his heels the entire time. Yes, the crits help, but I think that Mono would have been able to successfully keep the momentum on his side despite the crits. I don't know. He called out the Rindo Berry Mirror Coat Gastrodon as soon as he saw it. He made good reads and made sure to whittle down John's team. He toxics the Lando. He gets a lot of fire blasts off. He knows that he needs to whittle down John's team because he wants to sweep at the end with either a Choice Bandit Azumarill or a Life Orb Emboar. And normally he wouldn't be able to do that, but because John's team is pretty slow, he's able to take advantage of that. And throughout this game, he's playing really well, and the one thing I want to draw attention to is, of course, when he's playing against the Reuniclus with his Azu. Now, I said this about a few coaches, but Mono got really paranoid about the Reuniclus having acid armor. However, you've seen the Trick Room. Almost never do Trick Room Unicluses have set up in acid armor. Trick Room usually means you're going to try to sweep, and to sweep you're probably going to need something offensive. Yes, it could have been something like Calm Mind. I've seen Trick Room Calm Mind, but a lot of times it's going to be Trick Room with enough coverage to be able to sweep at the end. You have to think about what it would have if it had Trick Room and Acid Armor. It would probably need Recovery because it's Magic Guard, and then it would have Mono attacking Psychic, but then it can't hit like Mana Buzz. So that wouldn't have been a good set at all because setup in Trick Room is not even that reliable anyway. So he had no reason not to click the Aqua Jet. And that almost cost him the game because it didn't put him in the best possible position to win the match. The best possible position would be to guarantee that the roll for the Sucker Punch was not a roll at all. It was just 100% guaranteed to kill, but he only let it be a 67% chance to kill. In the future, Mono's really going to have to calm down, think about what moves would realistically this Mon have, but overall, Mono played well. He still kept the roll in his favor, but he needs to keep this in mind for future weeks. Don't get too paranoid about what the sets could be, because a lot of the times you're talking about a 6-move set, and that just doesn't happen. And at number 4, I have the Atlanta Holuchas. Fizz, that was objectively the worst team builder I have ever seen. The picture was too small. There was nothing on it. Then he started getting rid of it. Fizz, fix your team builders. And, Choice Specs Volcanion. I wonder how many times I'm going to be seeing that in the future. Probably a lot. And Fizz, not too much to say about Fizz. He knew what he needed to win. Volcanion. He knew his opponent didn't have any switch-ins to Volcanion because what do you switch into it? Fizz just had the team matchup preview. He came in with a plan. Lots of things with pivoting. U-turn on the Mega Scizor. U-turn on the Whimsicott. U-turn on the Zoroark. U-turn a lot. Get into Volcanion, start firing off really powerful hits. He was able to bring his Volcanion on the Steelix really easily, and just continue to fire off Steam Eruption after Steam Eruption, Fire Blast after Fire Blast, and it just put in huge dents in Chimp's team. So that's the battle. He clicked Steam Eruption and basically won. There was nothing that Fizz really had to do exceptionally well in this battle except pivot around Chimp's team and then be able to bring in Volcanion. One thing though, and even though it didn't matter in the game, I don't think in terms of differential, going for Stun Spore in the Mega Diancie. I know he said it's a misclick. You gotta pick your moves carefully, especially on Wi-Fi. You can't just this is the green button, I'm gonna click it. It was the wrong green button. And in a match where you have to make sure you don't misclick like that, and you do, that can definitely cost you in future matches, so you have to be careful about what moves you actually go for. Aside from that, Fizz I just think played pretty damn well. He planned well, and he just got this really big victory. So if he keeps playing like this, he's gonna continue to do really well this season. And the top 3, I didn't really change at all. I didn't really see much of a point to changing, but, you know. So at number 3, I have the San Diego Chim Chargers, or Chimichangas, because Trav's not here. Envy brought non-stab Hidden Power Dragon, the best non-stab dragon coverage. He deserved to win based on that alone. He's shell smashing Gorbis as an actual sweeper instead of trying to smash pass, and I really like that better. I don't like trying to attempt to smash pass. I just think it's not a great strategy. And aside from that, there's nothing really crazy this week. It's just, again, it's very efficient planning. He's the Jirachi to set up all over Nick's face and break through things like the Alakazam and really gain a lot of momentum very early in the match. Once the Jirachi got him the momentum, Envy made sure to make the plays to never let go of that momentum. He always kept the matchup in his favor, sacked off things when he needed to, and then at the end, of course, he's got his trump card, which at this point seems to be Wakanberry. He really likes that Wakanberry. Able to set up on the Kyurem Black, take a Fusion Bolt, and then set up and deal with it. So Envy played this game really well. There's really not too much to say about this match just because it was so quick, but Envy is really good at getting the momentum early game. He's really good at making the best play possible every turn, keeping that momentum in his favor. It looks like he doesn't really care too much about differential. And if you keep winning, then it doesn't really matter what your differential is if you win every week. However, I would like to see him try to play a little bit more towards differential if he can. I'm not one to say that you need to play for differential. If it's risky to play for differential, don't play for differential. It's just as simple as that. If you feel like you're going to try to go for differential and it could possibly lose you the match, do not do it. Just sack off what you need to sack off and then go for the safe play and win the game. So I don't really know if he could have saved any differential this week, but in future weeks, it's good to try to save differential because we've seen that some people can lose out in the playoffs just by losing one differential point. So number 2, I have the San Francisco Arcanines, and I think it was a pretty poor planning this week by George. I don't know what it was. I think maybe he underestimated Tom this week. I'm not entirely certain. Like, he didn't really bring much to deal with Jellicent this week. There's nothing dedicated to kill it. Like, yeah, he's got some coverage moves, but Jellicent's really hard to take down, even with coverage moves. You really need to be able to have something that can hit it hard enough with like a stab knockoff, stab electric move, you know, whatever, to deal with it. But he didn't have that. Another thing is he needs to check his mons. George, this is the second week in a row where you haven't checked your mons beforehand. You only had 5 Draco Meteors. You need as many of those possible because it's a very low PP move, and you need to have as many as possible in case you start to run out, because that's a move you can definitely click 8 times in a game. And this week, like, George was playing much more safely this week. He wasn't making predictions as he normally plays. You know, he doesn't predict like, oh, Arcanine comes in, let me go for Earthquake. He's just always clicking the safe move, the safe play, and thinking he's going to be able to stay ahead this match. And it was working out decently well, except he just couldn't take on the Jellicent. He didn't predict it to be faster than his Melodic. And I don't really understand why he got so caught off guard by a fast-ish Jellicent. It was... I mean, he didn't even seem that caught off guard by Endeavor Reuniclus last week, and I barely see Endeavor at all, especially on something like Reuniclus. And overall, I felt it was just kind of a sloppy game for him this week. It was a big win, but it was just kind of a sloppy game. He wasn't making many predictions. He made one prediction towards the end. You know, the Jellicent was going to go for Taunt, and he switched out into his Latias to take the Taunt and then try to kill it, so... You know, he made some predictions, but it was really late game. But most of the game, it's really straightforward playing, no predictions, no nothing, and seeing if you can just stay ahead that way, and it didn't really work. It wasn't really working for him, especially around the Jellicent. I feel like he wasn't playing like himself this week, and he needs to go back to playing like himself, at least for next week, because, you know, he's playing Envy. I still have him ranked higher just because he won pretty big. As I said, like last week, 2 and 3 are pretty much interchangeable, so he's still number 2. And at number 1, I have the San Francisco Giantes. Now, overall, Geo had really solid planning. There was one thing I didn't like, and that was the Kova Berry on Chesnaught, and he said it was there for Excadrill and Heracross. Now, you could deal with the Excadrill using Superpower or Woodhammer, deals probably around half with the Woodhammer, and he said it could deal with the Heracross. It couldn't deal with the Heracross. Yes, I know Chesnaught killed Heracross, but that's because the Scarf Cross locked into Stone Edge, and it took a while for the Chesnaught to kill Heracross, because the reason you use a berry is to be able to take a hit and then fire back a big hit on your own, usually trying to OHKO whatever is trying to kill you. But if you can take a hit, like an aerial ace from a Heracross, and then not even do that much damage back, then there's really no reason for that to be your wall for it. So you need to change what moves it has to make sure it can deal with Heracross. Also, I didn't really understand Superpower over Drain Punch and the Wood Hammer over Seed Bomb. You don't want your wall having detrimental moves for it. Like Superpower, it's a physically defensive wall that attacks physically, and you're going to go for a move that's going to force it to switch out. So I don't really like that. But overall, this was the kind of stally play that I remember Gio doing so well last season. He slowly whittles down his opponent's team, except during the middle when he decides to just go out into Entei, bite the bullet, and see how much damage he can get off. And he just decimates the Azelf, puts a huge dent in the Rotom Heat, then able to take down the Rotom Heat. In the early game, it was slow. It was a slow game, and in the late game, it was again slow because he's using his walls very effectively. And he planned for the late game. He planned to be able to go into the late game, which Tup didn't do. While he didn't really have like tons of momentum in this match, like it wasn't just he had a lot of offensive momentum, he didn't need it. He just had the walls capable of just walling Tup's team to hell and back, and there was nothing that Tup could do about it. He played his Entei well, as always, had the walls needed for Sand Rush, it didn't do anything, and just played for a big victory. Had the para not happened on the Crest, maybe he could have gotten a 6-0 against Tup, but then again, had the para not happened on the Tentacruel, it might have been a 4-0, so who knows. But overall, it was a really well-deserved victory. I mean, Gio has almost twice as much differential as a second place, so he's doing very well, and I think he's going to continue to do very well in the future weeks. So that is going to wrap up the Week 3 power rankings for the GBA Season 6. I hope you all enjoyed. I'm sorry Trav wasn't here. He's not feeling well, but either way, you got to listen to me ramble on for, like 40 minutes, so should be happy about that. But if you have your own power rankings, please leave them down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear what you guys think of how people did this week, but that's all I got for today. My name is Berk, and I will see you all next week.